once again, we are sitting down for a conversation we call Attempted Intelligence. Today, essentially what we're going to do is lean into the concept of epistemologies, and when epistemologies, or when the reality of a situation, or the experience reality of a situation, or the observed reality of a situation, don't line up on more than one epistemology. Basically what we'll do is use what I would consider the extremes of the epistemological spectrum. Constructivism.
Positivism?
No. What is constructivism?
Oh, what is
That's
it?
the other side. Damn it.
What is it? We're going to do opposites. So I was like,
yeah, no, you're correct. Well followed. However, what I'm looking for is what is constructivism?
I always see it as multiple...
Okay. So, epistemology, the questions of epistemology is what can be known, how can it be known, and who can be the knower.
So my reality is created through what I perceive and feel as a constructivist?
That would be called empiricism.
Okay.
Right? So empiricism is what you observe.
Okay.
Right? So the constructivism...
Multiple
realities,
multiple
right? So the knowledge, so epistemology being a theory of knowledge and alteration, constructivism posits or puts forth that knowledge or truth is dependent on the observer, the environment of observation, and previous experience of the observer, and there are multiple realities because each observer...
I just directed that at myself, and I should have said the individual observer.
Whatever.
Yeah.
That's okay. This is why I'm here. Maybe. Positivism.
Positivism.
How many realities?
One.
Okay. Does it depend on the observer?
No.
No. Okay, so it should be true across observers. There's an attempt to decontextualize, so to remove the impact of the observer. Okay. So there are methodologies that would attempt to do that. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's the attempt. So the idea being that my experience versus the thing that is true regardless of situation, right? So an example of things not lining up particularly well is chronic cocaine use.
Okay.
Right? Now, not absolute chronic cocaine use, because objectively chronic cocaine use leads to a situation whereby the person doesn't even feel good when they take it anymore, they just have to, because they're addicted, so there's an absolute need. But cocaine use to the point where it still feels good when you use it, right? But, so the constructivist side of it is, it feels good when I use it. The objective or positivist side is essentially suggesting that it is impacting my social and economic life.
Okay.
Right? So I'm losing friendships, I'm not functioning particularly well, and I'm spending money and making less.
On the positive side, is there also like health concerns?
Yeah, so depending on the particular situation, how long the cocaine use has occurred for, you will often have heart issues as well as vascular issues. So if you hear about a 40-year-old having a stroke, unless there's an identifiable pre-existing condition, they were on cocaine or heroin.
Okay. They
were on white drugs. 40-year-olds don't have strokes. Not out of the blue.
Right. So
the population that you will hear anecdotally about this is people in high-stress jobs, traders, right? So people in the financial industry.
Right.
It's not entirely abnormal culturally for people in the financial industry to use cocaine, right? Stay up, pay more attention, stuff like that, kind of get a bump. And then when they're 40, their brain blows up, right? It's not that weird. So objectively, yes, there are health concerns that can occur with the consistent use. So it feels good, I like it, I want to keep doing it, although, so that's my experience, constructivism, whereas objectively, now here's the deal, you have to include from my experience that I am being socially and economically harmed, right? Like that also, that I do see that, I do feel that, or I identify it, but the objective deal, this is where they start to switch, but objectively I'm addicted, so I can't get away from it, right? So they blend pretty well. So the constructivist side, I like it, it feels good, but it is objectively harming me, right? But now objectively, I don't feel that good, and I can't get off of it. So subjectively I feel bad, but objectively I can't get off. So they start to blend and
crisscross almost.
The constructivist portion, the experience and feeling portion, happens at the same time as the objective portion. Right? So when we're talking about constructs, right, it's like the jerky instructor, but the student succeeds.
Right.
It's like, wow. So you're convinced that being a jerk is part of the secret sauce, but realistically, it's just because the student's smart.
Right. Because it happened at the same time.
Yeah. Do you have some thoughts of things that feel good, but are objectively... So, constructivism, the experience is positive, right? The experience is good, nice, enjoyable, whereas the objective reality is, well, this isn't just going that good.
One that came to mind was just having a wound or a scab.
Sure.
And it, I don't know if it was just me, but I often scratch it. So if you scratch a scab, from the positive...
so what leads you to scratch the scab?
It's usually just kind of, I don't know, it's itchy or whatever it is. I scratch it.
So there's a sensation.
Yeah, and
there's an obligate physical sensation.
Yeah, and then I scratch it and it feels better. It feels
right.
good.
Well, so there's an obligate physical sensation that seems to relate highly to the feeling of itchiness.
Right.
Right. It may very well be properly classified neurologically and without regard to observer as itchiness.
Right.
Then you do the normal thing.
Right.
Right. Now, if you are able to itch it and you do not harm the scab, is it a problem? Because you're talking about itching it so much that it starts to bleed again, right?
I don't know, but I'm gonna just assume no if I'm not actually harming the scab.
So if you don't break the scab, you don't break the plug, you don't make it bleed again, then it's probably going to continue on more or less as normal. So here's the deal. There's this really weird gray zone, right? So there's that thing that feels good. So you itch it and it feels good, but that's actually positivistic. That's observable across humans, right? Itch, scratch, multiple essentially neurological and hormonal signals that would lead to that, right? So objectively, you're like, yeah, itchy, scratchy,
Yeah.
However, in the situation where it relates to wound healing, if you disturb the wound, there is the immediate belief that, I opened it up again, it's going to take longer to heal. And here's the difficulty, right? How do you know how long it's going to take to heal? In an objective way, right? It's a unique wound.
And it's in across individuals, right?
Yeah, so essentially you probably are able to ask the question and observe, if we have similar wounds on similar people, let's just say you are able to equally wound somebody on either side of their body, right? On the right forearm and the left forearm, so that they can reach it for the scratch. Not in the middle of their back, so they can reach it for the scratch, right? And you purposely tell them every so often, like give them a consistent frequency, I want you to disturb the wound, I want blood to come out of it. And then the other side, you're not allowed, right? This would be very difficult to run, and you need a bunch of people. You might get a signal, it's possible that you get a signal that the opening of the wound and the blood would make it take longer, right? That's possible, right? Because you're comparing side to side, the same person, but you have to realize that one arm versus the other arm are not exactly, they're not vascularized the same, and I don't use them the same. So use pattern, my right arm moving more than my left arm, I pump more blood into it, more heal, like there's
other factors.
It's not the easiest to equate. So you'd need to basically lock somebody in, right? Like you're not allowed to move, and you're going to move both of their arms at the same time. So you'd have to really work hard to equate it. Then you'd be able to figure it out, right? Otherwise, it's essentially quasi-experimental, and you're saying the external observation is that if the wound is broken at a certain frequency, it takes this long to heal. And you'd need a bunch of people to be able to get the signal. That might surprise you, though. I don't know. I've never looked this up, but I know how you have to run it. So just that, it feels good, but it harms me. So then the question is, does it harm me?
Is it actually?
Right? So we can do this. We can say that might be one of the ones where if we were able to run the experiment properly, drawing a little blood from a wound, from a scab, just letting it trickle a little bit and getting the really nice that might actually stimulate the healing process to go faster. I don't know if we know. I haven't looked. So that's actually an interesting one, because it's possible that it is where scratching it, making it bleed, it takes longer to heal, right? Or the healing is not as complete, you're more likely to scar, right? It's possible.
Right.
But it might actually be counterintuitive, as a lot of objective things are, right? Then the reality is, as with anything in a positivist frame, there's variation, right? Like I said, like even if you just look at my veins, they're not the same, side to side. Like the superficial veins that you can actually see are not the same side to side. So that would intone that you should expect at least something mildly different from each arm. Right? They should behave a little different, right? So this is where positivism is going to give you the expectation through its investigations to expect variation, right? Whereas constructivism could say, or this could just be a cultural thing where it's been culturally constructed where if you scratch and you draw a little bit of blood, you're making it take longer to heal, right? But are you? Have we asked the question? Have we tested? Have we been able to do it in an acceptable way? I don't know how much you'd have to pay somebody to wound them evenly on both sides and then just have them and then spoon feed them. I don't know if that's possible to do in this day and age with appropriate review ethics boards. I'm not sure. Because I don't know why it would be of such material curiosity that it matters. Like, does it matter how long it takes?
Other than for the point of this conversation.
But it's worth considering. It's worth having a discussion about, to delve into, okay, is that somewhere where they do line up or where they don't line up? Immediately we're going to expect, like, oh no, you scratch it, and you get some blood, and that's bad. But is it bad? Right? Then here's the deal. Which scale's more important in that situation? Right? Because objectively, somebody who doesn't get that, what if that lack of itching, and like giving it a scratch, is the thing
that actually...
the thing that makes them have a psychotic break and kill. Right? Obviously, you have to go to the extremes
of course.
to attempt to consider it. But sometimes, can you see value in satisfying one side of the equation, satisfying that constructivist side, that side where it feels good, but it hurts, but it objectively harms. So it feels good experientially, but it objectively harms, right? Like it does, but that feeling good is so powerful that it means that I don't kill.
There's not another objective negative thing that's going to happen.
Or like there's another objective negative thing that could be removed
from
that would be worse than the personal harm. Right? The Dave Chappelle joke. He rapes but he saves. Right? So then the question becomes, considering the constructivist scale or the constructivist impact, right? Is it an impact of 1 or is it an impact of 1,000? Right? Does me having a cigarette calm me down enough that I don't get into a public enough space that I say something that causes material harm to 100 people, right? So they don't line up all the time, but sometimes one might be more important than the other. Right?
I'm just saying in the larger picture, right? Outside of that isolated incident.
However, is it a constructivist or a positivist that would be able to look at the impact of the constructivist side, so the constructivist experience, and the positivist or the objective outcomes, and identify whether or not you giving into that constructivist kind of personal feeling urge had an impact of 1 or an impact of many? Who would be better at figuring that out?
I feel like the positive would be.
Right?
Because it's independent of the observer, and you're trying to find this one kind of truth or...
The ability to abstract. So can you identify those situations in which giving into the thing that feels good but objectively harms you, does it help others? Right?
Just to find that out,
It would be a positivist who would probably have the better set of tools to figure that out. The constructivist tool is, well, it feels good, so it would be harder to abstract from there using constructivist tools. It's not that it's impossible, it's just harder.
Harder, yeah.
Right? So I think the message is sometimes giving into that urge, giving into that thing that feels good but objectively harms you. So constructively, or on the constructivist side, it is positive, it feels good, it's a good experience.
Right.
Or even if it's a bad experience, because you could go the other way.
Right.
In a constructivist sense, you don't like it. That's the way it's measured. You don't like it, right? But objectively, it harms you.
Okay.
Right? So then they actually line up.
Right.
But constructively, or on the constructivist side, it feels good, objectively harms you. However, objectively helps others.
Right.
Right? You get a drink in you, right? So you're an alcoholic, right? If every time you have a drink, it causes health concerns to compound over time,
Right.
right? And then today, right? So it feels good, or maybe it doesn't even feel good, because sometimes being an alcoholic doesn't feel good. You just drink because you have to,
Right.
right? Same with cocaine.
I was going to say same with
You
cocaine.
cocaine because you have to.
Right.
But today, they shut down the liquor store. What's going to happen?
Well, I don't know, but
Fair enough. Right? So here's the deal. So objectively, if you remove alcohol from an alcoholic, and so you're no longer allowing them to imbibe the liquor that is compounding their health problems over time, would you have the superficial ability to believe that's good for them to remove the alcohol?
superficially, yes.
However, the moment that you try to dry out an alcoholic, that you remove the liquor, they're usually going to have detoxing issues. So have you ever heard of the delirium tremens or the DTs?
No.
The horrible shakes?
Yeah.
Another thing that is known to happen objectively when you quickly remove alcohol from an alcoholic, heart attacks.
Because of the stress?
I couldn't point to the exact specific mechanism, but it is the quick change in chemistry
Right.
that does seem to lead to it. I can't absolutely pinpoint it.
Fair enough.
There might have been a time where I knew exactly how that worked, but right now I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, it is fairly well understood that for heavy alcoholics, you remove the alcohol, they're probably going to have a heart attack.
Right.
So do you remember when things were changing and stuff was allowed to be open and considered essential, and everybody was like, well, they closed the gym, but they left the liquor store open, this is ridiculous. I'm like, well, if you're concerned about the hospital system, drying out alcoholics
A lot of them.
will cause heart attacks,
Right.
which will flood hospitals, right? So it's easy to be convinced that constructivism kind of feel-good drinking, but causing compounding harm over time, so they don't quite line up, constructivism and positivism. You remove the constructivist thing, right? So it doesn't feel so good right now, but objectively on that positivistic scale, it should start to knock some of that negative compounding health stuff off. There's a quirk to it.
But then there's that other objective.
There's a quirk to it that the positivists can identify. Well, when we take it away from them and we think it's good for them, we dry them out, they die.
Right.
So each of these things, each of these epistemologies, these theories of knowledge, these theories of truth, have a way to look at stuff that has a benefit, that can identify where something might have a certain type of value and not another type of value. So the alcoholic, there's a value to them where they feel good and individually it's fantastic for them, or even though it objectively harms. It doesn't necessarily just harm them, but harms others. So you can say, well, I'll remove that so that we can reduce the harm to others. It's like, well, no, there's a degree to which it's going to cause harm to others.
Right.
But you need to be willing to look at them as opposed to just say, hey, it feels really good, but it hurts, right? Versus we'll remove the feels really good and that should do something to the other side. They don't balance out. They don't line up completely correctly.
Right.
It's not quite equivalent. There are times, though, when they line up nicely and counterintuitively.
Right.
Right? Does that make any sense, or does it
does.
seem too abstract?
No, I was curious with the. It almost seems like the lens has a branch that you can kind of go off onto.
Sure.
Especially with positivism, where you can kind of look at the individual and the effect of multiple people. So like if
Depends on how you pose the question.
Right.
Similar to constructivism, depends on how you pose the question.
And I just seen through some of the examples you were talking about that there's more again, depending on how you pose the question, there's more branches for positivism. I was just wondering if there's more branches for a constructivist that where it affects, where you're looking at the individual and you can look at the effects of.
Well, you can ask that question. So in a constructivist lens, it's what you would essentially do is, hey, you jump off a bridge, how do you feel about it?
Okay.
And then you can ask the question of the group. How does the group feel about it? And then you can identify the pattern.
So how does the group feel about me jumping
off a bridge? Right. So you can do that with a constructivist lens as well. Right. There's ways to do that. Right. So I don't know what the specific methodology would be called, but I'm sure there is one.
Okay.
Right. And if there isn't, somebody will create one. Whatever. But does that help your understanding of how to look at things, at the value of the constructivist lens, the value of the positivist lens, and maybe the value of trying to use both?
Well, yes, it does. But
nice.
it also just really emphasized that they're not just the one thing. Like if you do cross them over, there are gray areas where it crosses over.
It's called mixed methods.
Right.
Right. So you can use different mixed methods, but usually you'd be kind of from one side of the spectrum versus the other side of the spectrum to try to see if
more to one side?
not even. You try to be even if you can, and try to see if they line up nicely or they cross over, or if they don't. Right. Because sometimes being a jerk doesn't do anything to performance. Sometimes being a jerk does do something to performance.
Right.
You'd have to figure it out, right? So you have the objective measure and the measure of identifying are they a jerk or not, right? Like, or how do you feel about that? The deal with science is that science is a constraints-based process. You have to put walls up. You have to constrain what you're doing. You can't just look at everything and kind of figure it out. You have to essentially reduce things. So, well, people will use, it's reductionist. I'm like, well, you have no choice. You have to reduce so that you understand. You isolate it so you understand it, and then you plug it back in. So when you pull it out, you reduce. So you pull something out of its context, look at it, figure it out, right? Then you look at the context you took it from, figure out what happened to it. Is it functioning the same? Is it functioning differently, right? And then you see when you plug it back in, does it go back to normal? Does it change, right? Does it change because you took it out, right? So you have to be able to kind of move in and out of these things because science is a constraints-based process, right? If you don't put those constraints on, you won't understand anything. The problem is that it's more likely that that's the way that we work than the way things work, right? If we work differently, we might not need to do that.
Right.
But we work in a way where we do need to be reductionist at some times, and then we do need to be broader at other times. But to be able to reduce something, to pull it out, look at it, examine it as it is on its own, examine the context that you took it from and see how it's functioning, then plug them back together.
That's what this conversation has helped me understand, is pulling it out and not just going, I pulled it out. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And to be able to not just put it back in and go, okay, that's what happened, but to pull it out and look at the thing after you pulled it out. That's what I wasn't really doing.
Are there fuses you can pull in a car and have absolutely no detrimental effect on the ability of the car to do its main function?
Yes.
Are there tons of them?
Yes.
Right? Like, as long as weather's not a concern, you can pull almost every fuse out of that car.
Right.
And it's going to function. Right? The majority of them. Right? So it's like, they don't actually impact the main function, but they impact other functions that are important in certain contexts.
Yes.
Right? So the windshield wiper motor, it's not a problem when it's a nice day.
But say even just the windows and it's hot.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. Like, it can still drive.
Right.
You'll just be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? So objectively you can drive. Experientially, you're not a fan.
Right.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to add?
That's it.
Fantastic.